The Vexery Council chambers glowed with soft blue light as Elder HFY received the worst news in their species' peaceful history. Their long-range sensors had detected something terrifying, a massive fleet of black warships heading straight for their home system. The ships belonged to the Korthak Empire, a brutal race that had already destroyed dozens of civilizations across the galaxy. HFY's crystalline hands trembled as he looked at the readings. Over 1,000 enemy vessels were approaching, each one designed for one purpose: complete destruction. The Vexery had no weapons, no armies, no concept of violence. Their entire civilization was built on knowledge, art, and harmony. They were scholars and philosophers, not warriors. "Send the distress signal across all frequencies," HFY whispered to his aide. "Broadcast it to every corner of the galaxy. Someone must help us." The message went out into the void of space, carrying the desperate plea of 200 billion innocent lives. Most species who received it simply ignored the transmission or marked it as another lost cause. The Korthak had never been defeated. They were unstoppable. But in a distant star system, Admiral Junho Park was drinking his morning coffee aboard the human dreadnought, indomitable when the communication officer rushed to his side. "Sir, we're receiving an emergency transmission. It's a species-wide extinction alert." Park set down his cup and studied the holographic display that appeared before him. The message was barely coherent, filled with panic and terror. These aliens had never even seen warfare before, and now they faced complete annihilation in just days. The Admiral looked at his tactical screen. His small fleet consisted of 12 ships, destroyers, cruisers, and his flagship. According to the alien transmission, the Korthak force numbered over 1,000 vessels. Any reasonable military commander would call it impossible odds. Park smiled grimly. Humans had never been reasonable. He walked to the center of the bridge, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of electronics. "Communications, send a message to all ships in the fleet. Tell them we have a rescue mission." His officers exchanged glances. They knew that look in their admiral's eyes. It meant someone was about to learn why Earth was classified as a death world. "All vessels," Park announced over the fleet-wide channel, "set course for Vexery space. Maximum burn, combat formation. We're going to show these Korthak what happens when they threaten innocent people." The human fleet turned as one, their engines blazing as they raced toward a battle that would echo across the galaxy for generations. "Captain." Minsu Kim watched the tactical display with cold focus as his 3 destroyers dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Vexery territory. What he saw made his jaw tighten with rage. Massive Korthak battleships were already in orbit around the crystal cities below, their weapons charging for what would be the final bombardment. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface," his communications officer reported, voice shaking slightly. The hologram that appeared showed a tall, translucent being with features that seemed carved from living diamond. This was Elder HFY, and he was staring at the human crew with obvious confusion. You came," the alien whispered. "But your species, our computers say, you come from a Class 12 death world. How is this possible? Your planet should have killed you long ago." Kim almost smiled, despite the dire situation. Earth had that reputation across the galaxy, a nightmarish world of extreme weather, deadly predators, and constant natural disasters. Most aliens couldn't understand how anything could survive there, let alone evolve intelligence. "Elder, with respect, we'll discuss our planet later," Kim replied. "Right now, you have uninvited guests in your system." Before the alien could respond, Kim cut the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. "Target the lead Korthak cruiser. Show them what Death World engineering looks like." The human destroyer's railguns spoke with deadly precision. The magnetic accelerators launched tungsten rods at nearly light speed, and the lead Korthak ship simply disappeared. One moment it was there, the next it was expanding debris and superheated gas. The remaining Korthok scouts immediately turned toward the human ships. Their commanders, probably thinking these 3 small vessels would be easy prey. They had never been more wrong in their lives. Kim's ships moved like a pack of wolves, each destroyer coordinating perfectly with the others. They didn't fight like the Korthok expected. There was no wild aggression or mindless charging. Instead, every movement was calculated, every shot precisely aimed for maximum damage. The second Korthok ship tried to ram Kim's destroyer, expecting the smaller vessel to panic and flee. Instead, Kim's helmsman executed a maneuver that should have been impossible, rolling his ship through 3 dimensions while maintaining perfect firing position. The human railguns punched through the enemy's armor like it was made of paper down on the planet. Elders HFY and millions of other Vexuri watched in stunned silence as 3 small ships from an impossible world systematically destroyed a Korthok scouting force that should have obliterated them. "What manner of beings are these?" HFY whispered to his aide. The answer came when the surviving Korthok ships began retreating, something that had never happened in recorded galactic history. These humans weren't just warriors. They were something far more dangerous. They were predators who had learned to hunt among the stars. Commander Aijin Lee stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately began scanning the crystalline landscape of Vexuri Prime. Her tactical mind was already working, identifying defensive positions and potential ambush sites. Behind her, 200 human marines followed in perfect formation, their movements so coordinated they seemed to share a single mind. Elders HFY approached nervously, his crystalline form shimmering in the alien sunlight. "Commander Lee, we are grateful for your assistance, but perhaps you should know, the Korthok have landed ground forces on our northern continent. They are doing terrible things to our people there." Lee's expression didn't change, but her marines noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. That was never a good sign for their enemies. "How many?" she asked simply. "Our sensors detect approximately 5,000 Korthok warriors. They move in large groups, destroying everything in their path. We have no defenses against them." Lee nodded and turned to her sergeant. "Sung Min, establish base perimeter. Standard defensive grid. I want motion sensors, automated turrets, and overlapping fields of fire within the hour." The Vexuri watched in fascination as the humans worked. Each marine seemed to know exactly where to go and what to do without being told. Within minutes, what had been empty ground became a fortress that would make any military architect weep with envy. Elder Lee said while studying her tactical display, "Tell me about Korthok ground tactics." HFY's voice trembled. "They travel in massive formations, overwhelming their enemies with sheer numbers. They destroy settlements to spread fear, then move to the next target. They have never faced resistance before." Lee smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Then they're about to learn something new." 3 hours later, the first Korthok formation approached what they thought was a vulnerable Vexuri city. Instead, they found empty buildings and eerie silence. Their commander, a massive brute named Korthfer, roared orders to his warriors to spread out and search for survivors. That's when Lee sprung her trap: human snipers. Invisible in positions the Korthok never even considered, began picking off enemy leaders with surgical precision. The aliens had never encountered warfare like this. Their enemies were everywhere and nowhere, striking without warning and disappearing like ghosts. Korthfer tried to regroup his forces, but Lee had anticipated this. Her marines had spent days studying Korthok behavior patterns, and every retreat route led into another carefully prepared ambush. The aliens, who had terrorized 100 worlds, suddenly found themselves being hunted by predators who had turned warfare into an art form for the first time in their violent history. The Korthok began to feel something they had never experienced before: fear. Major Sung Woo Choi floated silently in the cargo bay of his stealth ship, checking his equipment one final time. Around him, 20 of humanity's most elite Special Forces operators prepared for what would become legendary as the first deep strike mission against the Korthak Empire. "Remember," Choi whispered into his comm unit, "we're not here to fight fair. We're here to teach these aliens what happens when you threaten innocent people." His team had spent weeks studying Korthak behavior patterns. These brutal creatures had conquered dozens of worlds using the same simple strategy: overwhelming force and terror tactics. They had never faced an enemy that could think 3 steps ahead. The stealth ship drifted past, Korthak patrol vessels completely undetected. Human technology had always been different from other galactic civilizations. While aliens focused on raw power, humans had perfected the art of not being seen when they didn't want to be. Choi's first target was a Korthak supply depot on the moon of Zarian 7. Intelligence reports showed this facility supplied weapons and ammunition to 3 entire Korthak battle fleets. Destroying it would cripple their operations across multiple star systems. The team inserted via drop pods, landing in the facility's blind spot that Choi had identified from orbital surveillance. The Korthak guards had never heard of concepts like perimeter security or defensive depth. They simply relied on their reputation for brutality to keep enemies away. That was their first mistake. Choi's team moved through the facility like shadows, placing charges with surgical precision. The Korthak workers continued their duties, completely unaware that death walked among them. Within 30 minutes, the humans had rigged the entire complex to explode. But Choi wasn't finished. As his team prepared to evacuate, he accessed the facility's communication array and sent a message to every Korthak commander in the sector. "This is Major Choi of the human military," his voice echoed across Korthak communication channels. "You made a mistake when you threatened the Vexery. We are coming for you. We are everywhere. We are watching." The facility erupted in a massive fireball that could be seen from orbit, taking with it enough supplies to arm 50,000 Korthak warriors. Across the galaxy, similar operations were occurring simultaneously. Human teams struck supply convoys, communication relays, and command centers with perfect coordination. Each attack was precisely timed to create maximum confusion and fear. The Korthak commanders tried to respond. But how do you fight an enemy you can't see? How do you defend against opponents who strike from the shadows and vanish before you can retaliate? For the first time in their violent history, the Korthak began checking dark corners and jumping at unexpected sounds. The hunters had become the hunted, and they didn't like the feeling. In the depths of space, Major Choi smiled as he watched another Korthak patrol change course to avoid an area where humans might be hiding. The psychological warfare had begun. Lieutenant Colonel June Nam crouched behind a crystalline ridge, watching through her scope as 5,000 Korthak warriors assembled in the valley below. The alien forces moved in their typical fashion, a massive, undisciplined horde that relied on sheer numbers to overwhelm their enemies. "Colonel," her sergeant whispered through the comm, "they outnumber us 20 to 1. Nam smiled without taking her eyes off the enemy formation. "Sergeant, you're thinking like them. Numbers don't win battles. Coordination does." Her regiment of 250 Marines was scattered across the valley in positions that seemed random to any observer. But Nam saw the pattern. Each squad was placed exactly where they needed to be, creating an invisible web of overlapping fire zones and mutual support. The Korthak commander, a massive brute called Dekmar, raised his weapon and roared a battle cry that echoed across the valley. His warriors responded with their own savage howls and began charging up the slopes toward what they thought were scattered groups of helpless humans. That's when Nam demonstrated why human military doctrine was studied with fear across the galaxy. "Execute Pattern 7, she said calmly into her comm. What happened next would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy. Without a single additional word of command, Nam's entire regiment moved as one. Squads that had been hidden suddenly appeared at perfect angles to catch the enemy in crossfire. Marines who seemed to be retreating lead Korthok warriors directly into carefully prepared ambushes. Private Dong Hai and Kim, positioned on the eastern ridge, saw enemy forces approaching. His squadmate's position before the squadmate did. Without being asked, he shifted his fire to provide cover. Knowing instinctively that his teammate would adjust accordingly, Corporal Minyoung Park found herself surrounded by Korthok warriors, but she didn't panic. She knew that Sergeant Yu Lee was already moving to provide support from behind, while Lance Corporal Jae-sung Han would create a distraction from the left flank. The Korthok had never seen anything like it. These humans fought like a single creature, with hundreds of eyes and arms. Every movement by one Marine was instantly understood and complemented by dozens of others, creating a deadly dance that turned the aliens' own momentum against them. Vec watched in growing horror as his superior numbers became a liability. His warriors kept getting in each other's way while the humans moved with perfect coordination. Every time he tried to concentrate his forces against one position, the humans seemed to know exactly where he was going to attack. Within an hour, what should have been an easy victory for the Korthok had become a massacre. Nam's regiment had destroyed an enemy force 20 times their size while suffering minimal casualties. As the surviving Korthok fled in terror, Nam spoke quietly into her com. All units maintain pursuit formation. Let's teach them what happens when prey fights back. The message reached Admiral Park's flagship, just as he was reviewing battle reports from the successful ground operations. Communications Officer Lieutenant Haewon Shin approached with a datapad, her face pale with shock. Sir, we've received confirmation from long-range scouts. The Korthok they've destroyed 3 Vexery colony worlds, completely sterilized them. Park's coffee cup shattered on the deck as his hand tightened involuntarily. Around the bridge, officers stopped their conversations and turned to look at their commander. They all knew that expression. It was the same look their ancestors had worn when facing those who hurt the innocent. How many? Park asked, his voice deadly quiet. 15 billion civilians, sir. Men, women, children. The Korthok used plasma bombardment to turn the entire surface of each planet into molten glass. Elder Zefti's hologram appeared on the bridge's main screen, his crystalline features twisted with grief. Admiral, they did this because we dared to ask for help. They wanted to punish us for resisting. Something changed in Admiral Park's eyes. His officers had served with him for years, through countless battles and difficult decisions, but they had never seen him look like this. The professional military commander was still there, but underneath, something ancient and primal had awakened. Communications, send a message to all fleet commanders, Park said, his voice carrying across every ship in the human fleet. Authorization, code Omega-7. Unrestricted warfare protocols are now in effect. Colonel Taeyong-o received a transmission aboard his assault cruiser and felt his blood turn to ice. Omega-7 hadn't been used since the brutal conflicts of humanity's early space expansion. It meant the gloves were off. It meant no mercy. All ships, O announced over the tactical network, the enemy has crossed a line that should never be crossed. They murdered innocents out of spite. Today, we remind the galaxy why our homeworld is called a world. The human fleet transformed. Ships that had been fighting with calculated precision suddenly became something else entirely. Every Korthok vessel in the system found itself being hunted by predators that no longer cared about strategy or tactics, only about making the enemy pay. O's cruiser locked onto a fleeing Korthok destroyer and pursued it through 3 hyperspace jumps. The alien ship was faster, but the humans were relentless. When the destroyer finally ran out of fuel, O's boarding parties showed them what happened when humans stopped playing by civilized rules. Across the star system, similar scenes played out. Human ships chased down every Korthok vessel, no matter how small, or insignificant. There would be no survivors to report back, no witnesses to carry tales of mercy. The Vexery watched in awe and terror as their gentle saviors became instruments of absolute justice. These humans weren't just soldiers anymore. They were the wrath of every innocent life that had been taken. General So Young-yoon stood in the war room aboard the command carrier, relentless, staring at a three-dimensional map of Korthak's space that glowed with red enemy positions. But those red dots were disappearing one by one, and Yoon's expression showed the cold satisfaction of a predator that had cornered its prey. "General," her intelligence officer reported, "we've successfully captured the Korthak communication relay at Sector 7. Our tech teams are already inside their network." Yoon nodded. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The Korthak had built their empire on brute force, never imagining that someone might use their own systems against them. They were about to learn why humans had survived on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. "Begin Operation Stranglehold," she commanded. Across Korthak space, human engineering teams that had infiltrated enemy stations began their work. Chief Engineer Byung-ho Kong smiled as he accessed the main computer core of a Korthak weapons factory. The aliens had no concept of cybersecurity. Their systems were wide open. "Time to show them some Earth ingenuity," he muttered, his fingers flying across the alien interface. Within hours, Korthak weapons factories began producing defective ammunition. Their own guns would explode in their hands. Navigation systems started sending ships to the wrong coordinates, causing massive collisions in their own fleets. Communication networks became weapons, broadcasting false orders that sent Korthak forces racing toward empty space. But Yoon wasn't finished. She had studied the Korthak Empire's structure and found its greatest weakness. They depended entirely on fear to control their conquered worlds. Remove that fear, and the entire system would collapse. "Send teams to every world the Korthak have enslaved," she ordered. "Arm the locals. Show them that their oppressors can bleed." Captain Won-Sik Lee led one of these liberation missions to the mining world of Kelos 3. The local population, a species of insect-like beings called the Trelawney, had been enslaved for decades. They cowered when Lee's Marines arrived, expecting more brutality instead. Lee handed their leader a plasma rifle and showed him how to use it. "The Korthak told you they were unstoppable," Lee said through his translator. "They lied." Within days, slave rebellions erupted across 50 Korthak worlds. The empire that had taken centuries to build began crumbling in weeks. Every conquered species rose up simultaneously, armed with captured Korthak weapons and supported by human advisors. The Korthak commanders tried to respond, but their own infrastructure was working against them. Ships broke down in deep space. Weapons misfired during crucial battles. Communication systems broadcast human psychological warfare messages that drove their warriors to panic. General Yoon watched the tactical display as another Korthak stronghold fell to rebellion. The red dots representing enemy forces were vanishing faster than her computers could update the map. "Ma'am," her aide asked quietly, "what do we do when there are no more Korthak left to fight?" Yoon's smile was cold as winter. "Then we make sure everyone in the galaxy remembers what happens when innocents are threatened." Fleet Admiral Do-hyun Kong stood on the bridge of the massive human dreadnought Vengeance, watching as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Korthak home system. Behind him stretched the largest human armada ever assembled, 300 warships, their hulls bearing the scars of countless battles across Korthak space. The enemy homeworld of Korthaga hung before them like a diseased jewel, surrounded by the largest defensive fleet the galaxy had ever seen. Orbital weapon platforms bristled with enough firepower to crack planets. Massive battle stations guarded every approach route. "Admiral," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the planetary surface. It's the Korthak Supreme War Leader." The hologram that appeared showed a creature of pure malice, Vorthak the Destroyer. the alien who had personally ordered the genocide of countless worlds. His voice rumbled with arrogance, despite the human fleet surrounding his world. "Soft flesh creatures," he snarled. "You think your small fleet can threaten the heart of our empire? We have ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years. You are nothing but insects." Admiral Kong's response was delivered in a voice that could have frozen stars. "Supreme War Leader, you have exactly 1 minute to order the complete surrender of all Korthok forces. Refuse, and we will show you why the galaxy calls Earth a death world." Vorthak's laughter echoed across the comm channel. "We choose death before dishonor. All ships, destroy these vermin." Kong closed the channel and turned to his weapons officer. "All ships are authorized to fire at will. Show them no mercy." What followed was not a battle, it was an execution. The Korthok had expected the humans to charge forward in a desperate assault. Instead, Kong's fleet moved like a precision instrument, each ship knowing exactly where it needed to be. Human vessels that seemed to retreat suddenly appeared at perfect angles to catch enemy formations in devastating crossfire. Captain Jinwoo Park commanded the destroyer Lightning as it danced between Korthok battleships, its railguns punching through armor that should have been impenetrable. His crew worked with mechanical precision, each shot calculated for maximum damage. The orbital defense platforms that had protected Korthaga for centuries found themselves being dismantled by human engineering teams who had spent months studying their weaknesses. Commander Yoonji Nam led her boarding parties through station after station, turning the aliens' own weapons against their home fleet. Supreme War Leader, Vorthak watched from his command bunker as his mighty fleet was torn apart by creatures he had dismissed as harmless. His greatest warships, each one a masterpiece of destructive technology, were being destroyed by vessels half their size. "How is this possible?" he whispered, his voice breaking. The answer came 6 hours later, when Admiral Kong's forces achieved complete victory. Not a single human ship had been lost, while the entire Korthok home fleet drifted as burning wreckage. The battle became legend across 1,000 worlds. The day the galaxy learned that humans weren't just another species, they were apex predators among the stars. 3 months after the fall of the Korthok Empire, Admiral Junho Park stood in the rebuilt crystal chambers of the Vexery Council. Elder Zeftai approached him with something humans had never seen before, a crystalline being, trying to kneel in gratitude. "Please, Elder," Park said gently, helping the alien to his feet. "There's no need for that. We did what anyone should do when innocents are threatened." Zeftai's voice shimmered with emotion. "Admiral, your species saved not just our people, but dozens of worlds the Korthok had enslaved. Yet you ask for nothing. In return, we do not understand." Park smiled and gestured toward the viewport, where human patrol ships moved in steady formations around Vexery space. "We ask for one thing, Elder. Help us make sure this never happens again." Word of humanity's victory had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The species that lived on an impossible death world had not only defeated the unstoppable Korthak Empire, they had done it to protect strangers they had never met. Ambassador Sominli found herself flooded with requests from dozens of alien civilizations. The peaceful Alvari wanted human protection from space pirates. The scholarly Zindani asked for help against raiders who destroyed their libraries. Even the proud Keltorian Republic, who had initially refused human assistance, quietly sent diplomatic messages asking about defensive alliances. "Ma'am," her aide reported during a busy afternoon, "we have 17 more species requesting to join the Terran Defense Compact. The Volharis say they're willing to relocate their entire homeworld if it means human protection." Lee shook her head in amazement. "Tell them relocation won't be necessary. Send patrol schedules to all member worlds." Across the galaxy, human fleets took up their new positions. Captain Minsu Kim, the destroyer commander, who had first arrived at Vexery space, now led a squadron protecting the peaceful Nathari from aggressive neighbors. His ships moved through their system like guardian angels, their presence alone enough to deter any potential threats. Lieutenant Colonel Jun Nam established training academies on dozens of worlds, teaching local defense forces human military tactics. Not for conquest, but for protection. Her students learned that the greatest strength wasn't in weapons or numbers, but in standing together against those who would harm the innocent. General So Young-yoon coordinated the vast network of human forces now spread across hundreds of star systems. Her war room had become a coordination center for peace, monitoring potential threats and deploying rapid response teams wherever they were needed. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. The humans from the Death World weren't conquerors or destroyers. They were guardians who had appointed themselves protectors of those who couldn't protect themselves. In the depths of space, human patrol ships continued their endless vigil, their sensors always watching, their weapons always ready. Their message was simple and clear to anyone who might threaten the innocent. We are here, we are watching, and we will never let evil triumph again.